Hey guys, so I want you to go back with me a little bit in history. Go back to October 10th, 2008, and the Republican presidential candidate at the time was a guy named John McCain. He took a question from a lady during a town hall. That question initiated by her calling then candidate Barack Obama an Arab terrorist. McCain quickly took the mic from her and said, this is a quote, "No, ma'am, he's a decent family man and citizen that I just happen to have disagreements on fundamental issues. That's what the campaign's all about. He's not an Arab." Fast forward to 2019, and then new presidential candidate Biden ran on the message of giving Trump another 4 years in office would forever fundamentally change the character of the United States. He could easily make such a claim based off the mere fact that Trump was the architect of the falsehood concerning President Barack Obama's citizenship. But then again, there's so many other reasons. Of note, President Trump's need to make it evident to racists like David Duke and Richard Spencer that he would always keep their interests at heart, letting their conspiracy theories run wild, letting Stephen Miller be the architect a number of his foreign and domestic policies. Trump was, is, and will be a bigot, a misogynist, a racist, and elitist. This is just a fact. The proof is evident both anecdotally and statistically. I'm not going to try and bore you with the details. Here's the issue. President Biden is now calling for a time of healing. Sounds good on his face, right? He's quoted as saying that Trump supporters are not his enemy, but they are Americans, inadvertently hearkening back to a time where people who occupied the same landmass denoted as the United States of America were, in fact, enemies of each other. That time was, of course, the Civil War. That was a pivotal point in United States history, and it still bears lessons that we need to learn today and can be talked about right now. That's why I'm here. Indeed, the Civil War can teach us a plethora of things about the efficacy of this experiment in democracy that we call America, and not just by looking at the causes, but also by the aftermath. Immediately following the Civil War, we have a period of Reconstruction, right? That's where the U.S. passes the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment and is dedicated to restoring the rights of the millions of human beings that were in bondage at the time, slaves, right? It's now that we see our first black representatives on a national level, but like every time in American history, when we make progress, the backlash is severe. And this time, the backlash included black codes and poll taxes, which leads to the Jim Crow South. Why such a change was derailed, and what derailed that progressive move towards racial equality? Well, the direct threat were racists, right? Who couldn't fathom allowing individuals they had seen as cattle, because that's what slaves were, right, have equal rights to themselves. It just didn't make sense to them. They couldn't fathom it. It wasn't going to work. But what enabled the downturn was a white majority that was sick of war and was willing to make concessions in an effort to heal from our great divide. Sound familiar? To be blunt, I question whether Joe Biden now is right. Can President Trump, a man who would negatively and permanently alter the character of the United States, engender support from individuals who could now be considered allied to opposing principles in reality, to the principles we're supposed to purport to be about in the United States? To be put simply, I don't know whether or not those individuals who doggedly support him, now lame duck President Trump, can quickly, easily, or even ever be folded back into the amalgam that we call America. For that matter, do his supporters even really want to be incorporated back into the America that now stands or will stand? I don't know. Seems obvious, at least for a vocal portion of his supporters, the answer is absolutely no. They will not go quietly. They will not acquiesce to any fundamental changes in leadership. They are not having it. And according to a quote by the GOP party, they're willing to lay down their lives to make sure that doesn't happen. As Joe Biden states, these are not our enemies. They are Americans. I'm going to reserve some resonance, to accept that assertion, using my foremost evidence, honestly, as the actions of those very same individuals in question. I dare say that a vast number of Trump supporters are welcoming to continued division, not any type of idealistic unity. I have my own anecdotal evidence, but my wonder is whether or not there will be a reckoning or a civil war on December 14th, when the Electoral College meets. Why do I know that date? Because it was brought to my attention by a Trump supporter during a protest in which he said there would be a civil war on their date. There are protests in the street right now with people yelling the same fascist chants that predicated the Night of the Long Knives in Germany in the late 1930s. Does that not inherently make those individuals my enemy? We did fight a war against them, right? Such a question is of particular importance to me, considering the oath that I took to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. Surely the fact these individuals reside inside my country does not make them immune to my charge to defend the ideals of this country against even them, right? Surely the allies of tyranny, mendacity, bigotry, misogyny, white supremacy, and hatred cannot equally be the ally of American virtues, right? At least not the ones we purport to stand for. If we are to rewind to the time period immediately following the Civil War, also known as the Reconstruction era, the United States and Americans as a whole were faced with the same exact dilemma. Do we treat the traitors of our nation as traitors? Or do we do everything that is necessary to enforce the rights that we have now given black people? Are the people who were mere weeks ago charged with killing us still our enemies? And more important, if they still are our enemies, what are we going to do with them? Arguably, fortunately for white landowning men in the country, after Grant's presidency, the government was much more concerned about quelling the divide than enforcing the newly found freedoms for black people. So instead of mandating integration and the equality that the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment were supposed to introduce to America, we allowed Jim Crow. And segregation then became the law of the land. So are we going to make the same mistake, right? Is history consistently bound to repeat itself? I don't know. I'm not trying to insinuate, by the way, that every Trump voter is a horrible person. I have friends who voted for Trump. What is, however, overwhelmingly evident is that those friends did so while knowing both where I stand and where, more importantly, he stands. If they are cool with voting for someone who vehemently stands against black people, so be it. That's fine. If they try to convince themselves otherwise, then they really aren't truly my friends. But that lends itself to a totally another video and another talk. More importantly, if they continue to stand with the president and try to call for him to overturn the election, then they're probably the enemy of the country and the Constitution. Let me call for you to understand that I solemnly swore to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, both foreign and domestic, and that I bear true faith and allegiance to the same. You see, the enemy is still my enemy if they live next door. Let us not forget that as we move forward. So, with that being said, whether you are my enemy or the enemy of the United States, I have been called on by my Lord and Savior to love you as a human. And so I do. I love you all.